Hello.
Hello, and welcome to the Geek Embassy Talk, Sexual Identities. Thanks for joining us. We're live on the Rose City Comic-Con Facebook page and the AwesomeCon Facebook page, and we're so glad you're here with us today. Let's see, I'm Regina McMenomy. I am the executive editor at the Geek Embassy, which is a geeky website and podcast where we talk about all our geeky passions. I have with me today Isabela, Dante, and Joanna, and we're going to have a conversation about our sexual identities, definitions of sexual identities, and some representations of queer identities in pop culture, specifically geeky pop culture, which we are all pretty big fans of. So we do have some moderators who are looking at the Facebook pages. So if you do have comments or questions for us, share them there and they will get them to us and we will incorporate them into our conversation. All right, how's everyone doing today?
I mean, my internet's being kind of a jerk, but otherwise I'm doing okay.
Let's hope it gets its act together.
I certainly hope so.
So if you do need to mute your video, if that makes it easier, that is just definitely something that, you know, you can do. We'll miss seeing your face. All right, so I'll start with just a really brief introduction, then we'll go kind of around the circle here. So my name's Regina. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DocLiz with 2 Z's. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I identify as queer, bisexual, demisexual, and cisgender. And we'll get into what some of those terms mean after we kind of get everybody's down. So, Isabela?
Hi, I'm Isabela Oliveira. I'm the content manager and I guess podcast editor for the Geek Embassy. I'm just gonna throw that one in there.
Yeah.
I am, let's see, I am trying to look at our notes and I can't find them. But I am a queer, lesbian, depending on where we are, demisexual, gray romantic, Black Latina, autistic. I forget all my labels, but that's most of them right now.
That's most of them. Awesome. All right, Dante.
Hi, I'm Dante Buccieri. I have also notes as well, and they're over there. And now they're over here. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am cisgender, mostly straight, mostly hetero-romantic, and yeah, half Latino, half white. That's pretty much all I've got. Oh, I'm the host of the Geek Embassy Watches, a monthly roundtable where we talk about what we've been watching on TV and what we're looking forward to in the future. So
yep.
Come and join us every single month. It's getting a little bit crazy with quarantine television.
Yeah, and lots of rewatching we've been talking about.
I've gone through Star Wars, Star Trek, and all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the last 60 days. So
yeah.
It's been a trip.
All right, Joanna.
I am Joanna Milius, occasional contributor at the Geek Embassy. I am a sci-fi and fantasy writer, and I cisgender, bisexual, she, her, hers. I don't know what else to say. I'm white. I'm depressed, and yeah, ready to party.
Oh, if we're going that far, then we definitely have anxiety and low level depression on this side too. Definitely exemplified by the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
I think I've developed anxiety as a result of the pandemic.
Yes.
I'm a raging extrovert, and being cooped up by myself in this tiny, 500 square foot apartment is driving me insane.
It's not for the faint of heart. I think it's putting lots of us to the test.
Ain't that the truth?
Yes. All right, so so that gives kind of some basic labels that we all have. So let's see, which one should we start with? What should we talk about first from the labels that we've thrown out there?
Well, my confused self could use a little help because when I first came out, bisexual was the term that most resonated with me. Upon further research, I've realized I'm probably technically pansexual because it really doesn't matter what your gender is as long as you are confident in yourself. That's what I'm attracted to. So I guess bisexual asterisk pansexual.
Right. So if we want to start with those definitions, bisexual came out when we're still very much embedded in the gender spectrum, being male versus female, having two. And that's where kind of the term came from. It came from, okay, you're not just either, hetero or homosexual. You could be both. And that's where the term came from. You can be attracted to both genders. And then as, we've evolved and started to accept the idea that, well, maybe there are more than two genders, pansexual was part of what came out of that as well, where it starts to open up that spectrum to not just look at that binary of male, female. So that's definitely.
I've also heard a lot of people explain bisexual as in it's people who present as a gender like yours and a gender that is also people who don't represent, who don't present as a gender like your own. So it's like, so if you present as female, then, you're attracted to females, but also anyone else, basically. Yeah. I have a few friends who identify as bisexual under that definition.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as the mostly straight guy who feels very uncomfortable being here because I'm a mostly straight guy speaking on a sexual identity panel, where do
mostly straight guy is a sexual identity?
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
You're absolutely correct. But where do you all throw the the line between bisexual versus pansexual? Now that we've come into the era where it's widely recognized that gender is a spectrum. It's no longer a binary 1 versus 0 kind of thing. Where do you come down on that term at this point? In both of your lives and in both of your identities.
Well, I think kind of what Jay was saying too about I think I'm comfortable identifying as bisexual because that's the first term that I learned. That was the identity that I first kind of grew into. So part of my evolution and my understanding of my own sexual identity, I hung out with all the gay kids in high school, right? Theater nerd. Two guys that I dated were gay, gay, but we didn't know or didn't talk about it, at least in my era. We didn't talk about it at all back then, and didn't understand, or didn't kind of see that as a pattern or recognize any of it until later when I came to learn that there was this term and there was this identity where you could be attracted to both. And I was like, okay, so this makes sense now. Now I'm starting to understand kind of my queer identity. I don't follow that main line of that heteronormativity, that hetero, sexual normalization. And I don't fit there. And so that's why I fit more with these people. And so for me personally, it's just, I think it's, I hate to be that person who doesn't evolve, but it's just how I think of myself. And I don't have that attachment to pansexual. And it's not necessarily because I feel like I'm only attracted to male and female people necessarily. It probably is more of a pansexual identity for me, but bisexual still resonates more for me than pansexual does, just because of where I was and what it meant to me when I was learning about myself. So that would be how I would.
Glad I'm not alone in that.
I learned something today.
And that's part of why I still use lesbian as an identity, especially since I find queer is more encompassing of my identity, since
Yes.
I have been attracted to like non-binary people in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but I do have that attachment to the word lesbian, and it is in certain circles easier to explain that to people, because then you don't have to explain the entirety of gender. It's just someone who just asks offhand about something.
Right.
Or having to explain to people that queer isn't necessarily a slur anymore, because that is something that is coming around again, and
Right.
and people who think queer shouldn't be used, and it's kind of a like going against like all that. That's why I keep using queer, especially to kind of go against that kind of discourse.
Yeah,
Taking
kind of like a reclaiming of the term. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's Zoom. We're all going to be speaking over each other. It's how it's
I mean,
designed.
we've done podcasts before. This is how it goes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have definitely spoken over you, Dante, many times. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that's one of the reasons, though, too, why I also like queer as, I mean, we talk about in, you know, like my studies and getting, you know, my PhD, we talk about queer theory. And I remember being in a classroom and one of my classmates describing queer theory as, instead of looking at everything like straight on, like hetero society tends to be like, you're just that straight line. It's like, it's turning it, like you turn it to its side and look at it from all angles. And so I think of the term queer being encompassing like that, where you aren't just looking down a straight and narrow, you know, path. You're taking each object or each person as their whole and kind of turning and seeing them as a 3D image instead of a straight line. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I will probably always identify, like in my list, I put queer first too, because like, you know, don't fit in this line.
Yeah, exactly. And it encompasses more than just my sexual identity. It also encompasses like my romantic orientation, all of that rolled into one umbrella, so to speak. So
yep, absolutely. Good.
Yeah, wonderful little cornucopia.
Hey Dante, can you really quickly like unplug your mic and plug it back in and see if you're having like maybe a connection? You're still coming in real low on your.
Uh-oh. Okay, I unplugged and replugged. How's this sound?
It's a little better, but it's still coming in kind of low. That's all right. We can hear you. It's just a little dimmer than it has been in the past.
Okay.
All right.
I'll try to eat the microphone next time.
Okay. So
use your ref voice, Dante.
You don't want me to use my ref voice.
Okay. For those uninitiated, Dante is a ref for roller derby. He was a Rose City roller derby, and now he's in Eugene, and I can't remember what they're called.
I'm with the Emerald City Roller Girls and Lane County Concussion, and also Cherry City Roller Derby up in Salem, Oregon.
There you go.
Because, you know, I hate having free time is basically the motif here, and you know, now I've got all of it. It's great.
All right, so as we kind of move through this, I want to talk a little bit about, like, I already shared a little bit of my story about like where I recognized or started to learn more about my identity. So I want to talk to you guys about like where you first recognized your sexual identity. So Dante, when did you know you were straight?
That's a great question. I mean, like, I've never really questioned it. I mean, you know, like I've never really questioned it. You know, I grew up in a, you know, fairly like milquetoast small town. You know, traditional Catholic values. Is like, oh, okay, cool. Like this still kind of fits. Like everything's just how all the adults in my life tell me it's supposed to be. Yeah, and then you go to college and things just get turned upside down. And it's been kind of an ongoing. I don't don't feel comfortable using the word struggle, but for lack of a better term, like I'll just say it's a struggle, to, I guess, label myself. Like the most comfortable thing I can come up with is like mostly straight, because I have definitely experienced a lot of you know, emotional and physical attraction to to other male and male presenting folks. But I think, just in doing research and in doing reading, it's probably a little bit more like mostly straight for women, but like kind of demisexual for men. Like there has to be that emotional connection there, otherwise it just really doesn't do much for me. And there was a lot of just mental backlogging and reconciliation. Like I had a very intense and emotionally close friendship with a good friend in college. They were male presenting at the time. I'm not sure what their pronouns are now, so I'm just gonna say them at this point. But yeah, Jay and I were very close, and and there was a lot of feelings of romantic love there, and I've felt it like a couple more times as I go through my adult life, and struggled with thinking like, am I bisexual? I'm like, but that never really fit. So that's it's still an ongoing thing, and even when in the last like 2 or 3 years, seriously really questioning like, how straight am I? What's going on? It's still an ongoing journey, whereas it feels almost disingenuous. Like I feel very uncomfortable, like as a man, like as a person who's been basically saddled into the whole like I'm straight for most of my life, and then all of a sudden I'm 35 years old, 33 years old, and thinking to myself, just like, oh, like, do I fit into this space where like not a lot of other people need to be in this space, like who are me?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that's important to acknowledge too. We don't all know or recognize these aspects of our identity, at any specific time or any specific age, and there's no right time or no right place to come to recognize who you are or what you value or any of that. So but within that too, I also want to, there's a few terms that you use that I want to make sure we address as well. We need to talk a little bit about the differentiation between sexual attraction and romantic attraction, because they're not the same thing. They're sort of different categories. And I want to talk a little bit about demisexual, because I think at least 3 of us identified as demisexual as well. So Isabela, do you want to define demisexual? I don't do all the definitions.
So there are slight variations on the term, but the one that I see most used is people who need an emotional connection before they're sexually attracted to someone. And that sexual attraction may differ depending on how they feel, depending on where they are on the asexual spectrum. You can be completely and then there's the difference between like how much sexual attraction you actually feel and that kind of thing, because for me that's also tied into it. So but most often I feel like the definition is you need an emotional
connection,
tie to something to actually even be attracted to someone,
to have the physical works. The emotional, you have to have the emotional connection in order for the physical reaction to work.
Yep. And that's the thing that just as soon as I learned that term, like, oh, this makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Like, oh, this is where I am. So it's just, like I've never really come out, because like it feels disingenuous for me to say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come out as this. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like there are many more voices more important than mine that need to be heard. So like I'm very comfortable just taking a backseat. I've got this small victory for myself.
Well, I think it's important though, because I think in a lot of stereotypes, there's a lot of there's a lot of stereotyping that women, or female presenting people are going to be more likely to be demisexual, because it's what like narratives tell us women need, this emotional connection. So I think it's really important for men who identify as demisexual to talk about that, because it is something that isn't sort of portrayed, as, it's not normalized, not the way it is for women. So
yeah, and myself, I only came across the term like a few years ago.
Yeah, me too. I haven't known it for that long either.
And it really helped explain a lot of what was going on in my head, because I went several years without even dating anyone, and I feel like there was a lot of like feeling like I wasn't normal, or there was something like not right in my head. But no, I feel attraction in a slightly different way, and that's cool too.
And that's okay. I think for me too, there's a difference. I think the demi side of my sexuality tends to come out more with male connections. I think I'm more comfortable with women just in general. And some of that comes from past history and past experiences. But definitely in my relationships with the men I've had, having that emotional connection is vital to the sexual connection maintaining. So I think it really is kind of one of those things that does evolve and change based on your experiences as well. So, or at least personally it has for me. So Jay, what about you? When did you kind of like have your recognition of your sexual identity?
Well, I struggled with it a lot. I was raised Catholic and, pretty normal middle class upbringing. But I always kind of knew that
I was Catholic. I was raised Catholic too.
So was I, actually. Oh my God.
Man, look at that.
What are the chances?
We're all here on a sexual identities panel. Like, that says a lot.
It does say a lot.
Yeah.
I no longer identify as, I am definitely identified.
I identify as recovering Catholic.
So
that's it. That's exactly it.
Yep.
To rag on faith, whatever gets you through the day. I internalized a lot of stuff, but no, I grew up, tomboy wasn't the right term for it. Through high school and college, I had a lot of people telling me, oh, I thought you were a lesbian. I didn't realize you dated men. So I don't know if I'm still studying where I fall on the gender spectrum. I don't really feel like male or female or, anything in between. So I struggled a lot. And it wasn't until I came across bisexual representation that it finally clicked. Like, it's okay to have a fluidity about you. It's okay to have it be situational, dependent on the person. I got to give a shout out to BioWare for that. I'm sure we'll get into it. But the representation in video games is what really helped me become who I am.
That's awesome. I love those stories. I have an episode. So the podcast that I host is called Game On Girl. And one of my very first episodes when I was first producing the show 6 or 7 years ago was with a listener who was trans. And she came on and told her story about how gaming had really helped her understand her identity. And I love those stories. I think they're so powerful. I mean, I think literature and movies can do it the same way, but there's something about gaming, because you embody the characters that you're playing, where you actually get to experience those stories in a way that you don't otherwise. So I think it really has that potential. Yeah, cool. Yep. All right, what about you, Izzy?
You mean how I came to my identities?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I always grew up feeling like it didn't quite fit, especially with like a sort of religious background. I was always like, this doesn't quite mesh. But I didn't quite understand it until I was probably an adult. Like, I did not come out to someone until I was 18. Because I grew up in a small town. I did not have any queer friends. The first real queer representation I saw was watching The L Word. So, and that has its own share of...
That's got a whole host of problematic stuff to deal with.
That was the first thing that actually, like, laid it out for me, because there was always like that real nebulous, like,
what does this mean? And what is this?
like, oh, they're just really close, like the Xena Gabrielle, like, gal pals kind of representation, and nothing ever really like explicit that actually explained to me. And growing up, especially growing up Latina, it's something that's still not really talked about that much. Because it was only after I came out that I heard like about my gay cousin somewhere, and I'm like, what is no one talking about gay cousins? And now I am one of the gay cousins. So
right. Wasn't there oh God. Well, we're going to get into representations later. But oh God, I'm going to have to remember the name of the show. It's the Netflix show with the Cuban family that you made me watch, Isabela, and I can't remember what it's called.
One Day at a Time?
Yes, that one. I'm like, it was based on one of the 70s, the show from the 70s. Yeah, but isn't that one of the stories in that too, as one of the people comes out to her family, isn't there, and then they're at a family event, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's your other gay cousins, right?
Oh, yeah. That definitely. I think it was that one of the daughters, quinceañeras.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And she's like, where were all these people?
Right, like, where have you been? Like, why has nobody told me that we have gay family? Like, yeah. Yeah, so we'll get more into representations as we kind of get along here. I do want to give a shout out to Beth Lopez, who is listening, and she put a comment in, yay Dante.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Beth. Oh God, I knew Beth back when I was living on the East Coast. She was part of Connecticut Roller Girls.
All right.
That's where I got my start, and now she lives in Portland as well. So
all
glad
right.
you're watching.
Yes, thanks for watching. And again, if anybody watching has questions, just put them in the comments on the Facebook, and we will incorporate them into our chat here today. So Isabela said this already, that she was 18 before she sort of told anybody about her sexual identity. What about for you guys? Did you have a process of like telling people in your lives, or is it something that, oh, we're on a Facebook Live Zoom meeting now, everybody's gonna know?
Oh man. Jay, you want to go first?
I mean, I still was struggling into my early 20s to quote unquote define myself. So I remember coming out to my mother in a Jack in the Box, which was fun. But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people don't actually know in my life currently, because I am in a relationship with a man and have been for years and years and years. But I feel like I should talk about it more. I should, let people know that it's okay to have kind of a nebulous, or just an openness to,
right.
meet people and different kinds of attraction. But yeah, I was still working on it in my early 20s. It wasn't until then that I came out.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It was something I was hoping we'd kind of get to, because Jay and I both are in hetero relationships, and so it's a really interesting thing to that kind of idea of bi-erasure, or this part of you doesn't exist because you're in this type of relationship, and so it doesn't stop who you are.
Work this morning inadvertently, because explaining to them why I was taking the afternoon off. So I work with people, if anybody's watching. Bye.
Yeah.
I mean,
yep.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, for me, like I've been questioning kind of like internally, basically like since college, and only really became, I don't know, comfortable with like telling like just like the women that I've dated over the last like 5 or 6 years. And it was mostly just like, okay, like this is who I am, this is who you are, great. Like, we don't need to go ahead and like proclaim it to the world or anything. So I guess that means that I was today years old when when I told people in public about about what my sexual identity is. I mean, like, I've known you and Izzy for years, so I'm sure that like mostly Street has come up in private conversations with you two.
Right.
Like when we've been in cars and sushi restaurants for hours on end, like I'm sure that it's come up. But yeah, like basically just like, hey, Yeah, mostly straight. Sometimes I like, sometimes I like looking at dudes. Like, it's a thing.
I remember I did a very unofficial high school reunion with like just my actual friends from high school.
Oh, yeah.
Like 10 years ago. Was before everything in my life is before or after I finished my PhD. So it was before I finished my PhD. So it has to be 10 years or so ago. And we went to like a water park and we were, sitting and having lunch after having been on the slides or whatnot. And one of my friends from high school turns to me and he's like, tell me, what guys you're looking at, here at the water park. I want to know what your type is. And I just sat there and I was like, you guys know me pretty well. It's not that I don't have a filter. It's just, I just say what I'm thinking sometimes. Maybe that means I don't have a filter. I'm just honest. And so he's asking me what guys I'm looking at. And I'm like, I'm not looking at the guys here. Like, I'm looking at the women. And that was probably one of the very first times in any kind of public setting I was just like, here you go. You want to know? I'm not looking at the guys. There's lots of women to look at here. And,
Yep.
Yes.
Even to this day, it's coming out is a weird term because it's not a singular.
Right. It's not a singular event. It's not like one thing that happens, right?
Because you come out all the time talking about, I make a point nowadays to, if someone asks me something at work, I say, my girlfriend, and I say, I'm queer. And I bring in those things because because one of the first things my coworkers asked when I started my job was, are you married? And I wasn't dating anyone at the time. So it was kind of weird to be like, well, no, I'm not married, but I didn't know how to get into how do you explain that when but you also don't necessarily want people just assuming your straightness or your
well, because that does tend to be what happens, is that you do you
get you're straight until proven otherwise.
Right. Yes, exactly.
I know, especially as like a brown person, that it's often even more, I often come across as straight because it's assumed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say the same.
For many reasons.
Although I will note this, that I love to tell this story.
I don't know the story. What is
you don't know that? You don't know. I don't think you know the story. I tell it in class a lot. One of the times I was teaching women's studies, one of my students told me, and I hadn't presented to them at that time that I was bisexual. She told me that her dad was convinced I was a lesbian, and I'm like, I'm married to a man. And she's like, it doesn't matter to him. You're still a lesbian. And I was like, okay. Thanks for erasing like a huge portion of my identity and erasing my husband entirely.
Gracious.
Also, thank you for getting into my personal life.
Right. And like, why are you having a conversation with your dad about my sexuality anyway?
Yeah.
Because this is probably not appropriate in some ways.
It doesn't really sound like there was much of a discussion at all. Like, it just kind of sounds like he was like, nah, she gay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she teaches women's studies, so she has to be gay. And then I was like, I think at that point, because she told me that in class, and I think I told them at that point that I was bi and I identified as bisexual, but that I was, in a hetero-presenting relationship. And then I launched into the whole thing about, what it means to have an identity that is erased by other aspects of your identity and other aspects of your life. So, it was a good teaching moment. But it was, of course, a story that always stuck with me, because how could it not? Like, here's just this general assumption this person made about me, based on my career and, classes that I was teaching. So, yeah. All right, we have a couple more comments in here. Okay, we have lots of people saying hi to Dante. Gisela.
Oh, hi.
Okay.
Dante
Allison
knows 10 billion people
Richard,
as
yes,
a resident extrovert.
Dante knows
Yeah,
lots of
it's true.
people. And Pearl wants to know where your mouth guard is. Matza
Oh.
can't wait to skate with you again. So you're getting...
It's across the hall, and I'm not on skates, so she has no claim
And
here.
we have a couple of comments here from Jay, who's a fan of another podcast that I was doing called Geeking with the Moms. He said that hamburger place or an actual giant pop-up toy with a crank would say, "Pop, Mom, I'm gay," would be an interesting way to come out.
I did mean the restaurant. I came out in the restaurant Jack in the Box. But
Right.
awesome visual, and I wish it had come off.
Somebody needs to put that in a movie. That needs to be in a movie somewhere. And then he said there is definitely a stereotype for women's studies, and there is definitely a stereotype.
Oh,
for women's
absolutely.
studies. But it was just funny that I'm like, at the time, my daughter was, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm like, I'm a married mom. Like, part of my identity is suburban mom. Like, yes, I also teach women's studies. These two things can actually go together.
I'm a gay who actually never took women's studies, unfortunately. So
yes, well,
there we go.
I was
breaking stereotypes.
Then, so. You still had my class, so you still technically had a women's studies-ish class. Because all my classes end up having gender in them in some way.
True.
Yeah. All right. We also have Jill Vidal, who says hello to Dante.
Oh, hey, how's it going, Fox?
All right. So I think that pretty much covered all of us talking about at least sharing some. Did you guys have any other sort of aspects? Do we have any terms that we didn't really talk about? We really didn't talk about the difference between sexual and romantic attraction, though, right?
And Izzy threw out the word gray romantic, I believe was the term you threw out there.
I'm actually going to put her on the spot to do the difference between sexual and romantic as well.
How dare you? I have to look at my cheat sheet real quick.
That's fine. I also know you have the resources because I know you. Oh wait, here we go. We've got a question from Andrew. How do you, as people like me who identify as bi, feel about the claim that bi identity is trans exclusionary? This is a very good question, Andrew. Thank you.
Which is it's kind of one of the reasons why I've been trying to say pansexual more.
I've had the same thing, which is why I'm still at that battle with my heart about having identified, with bi as, early as I did. But there is that idea because bi still perpetuates the idea of the binary, right? Like it is the binary. I mean, it's bi, like binary.
Well, I'll also throw out that there are trans people who also do identify within the gender binary.
Right.
So, being attracted to women means women, and trans people, trans women are women. So that.
I have to say, trans women are also women.
Trans women are women.
Trans men are
We're not going to say the name of she who will not be named. She who will not be named. But women are women. Trans women are women. So let's just put that out there. So I do think that is a consideration I have, and that is, like Jay said, thinking about the being open and being inclusive is so important, and is so important right now in where we are in our society and in the world. Like, we need to be more inclusive. And so, like I said, it's kind of this personal battle of like helping my heart understand it doesn't change who I am to think of it as pansexual versus bisexual, just because bisexual is the term that I, first learned and had that, recognition with. So
you can also change the meaning of bisexual.
Yes.
That's okay too.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I've said this.
Bisexual can also be inclusive.
Yeah. I've expressed this to Isabela. There is a lot of erasure that goes on, and it is hard, I think, for women or men who are bisexual, who are or pansexual, who are in hetero-presenting relationships, because you do have like that part of your identity that isn't recognized by your circumstances. And it is something that I've definitely struggled with. Like, here's a whole part of myself that isn't seen, and that I don't necessarily know how to present. So we're getting some more questions in, so let's see what we have here. So Krista Rowe says, a question for all of us. Do you think there will come a point in your lifetime where there will not be a need to come out, when people stop assuming heterosexual is the norm? I dream of this day.
I mean,
go ahead, Dante. I feel like I'm going to go on a dry diatribe. So get your thing in.
I certainly hope that this is that this is a thing. With the constant the constant upheaval of the narrative around sex and sexual identities, I feel like it's inevitable that we're going to get to a place where we're folks of all different sexual identities, folks of all different gender identities, everything's just going to be out in the open, and we're going to eventually reach catharsis. I do believe that generally water does find its level, even though sometimes it takes a little bit longer than we would like. Do I believe that's going to happen in my lifetime? Maybe by the end of my lifetime, maybe. I think we've made a lot of great strides over the last couple of years, specifically within the last decade. But I think there's way too much work to do before we reach that cathartic state where everyone just is, and there's no need to have these conversations and uncomfortable conversations anymore. But all right, diatribe, go. Let's do it.
Well, I wanted to give Jay a chance too. I don't know if you had popped up too. So
go ahead, Jay, please, if you have something to say.
No, I was just agreeing with, the younger generation today gives me a lot of hope that they're the potential to move past that in the future.
Yeah.
I really want to diatribe.
Yeah. I have seen a huge change in the students who do come into my introductory women's studies class, in the understanding they have of these issues before they get to my classroom. In the last few years, it has been revolutionary. I'm like, oh, all right, you're 18 and you know what these identities are. And sometimes I will admit they know a little bit more than I do, because this is an ever-changing landscape. So, and I'll just, before we let Izzy on her diatribe, she's chomping at the bit, I'm sure. I will say that I think that we're always going to have ways we identify and identify ourselves. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we will just not have social locations or social markers of who we are. What I hope and what I dream is that they don't impact how people necessarily view you, that they don't change what they think about you based on that. And that's really the dream. We're always going to I think everybody wants to be who they are and wants to have that identity. It's when those identities end up not impacting your life in a negative way. So, all right. Yeah.
Okay. So one, I think the ideal is that coming out is just an expected conversation that we have in talking about ourselves, and that the fear of coming out ideally isn't there anymore. But that's still a conversation that I feel like still needs to exist in this utopic ideal. But I feel like it's a little bit like the colorblind argument, the I don't see race. The ideal is not for everyone to be happy-go-lucky and we are all treated exactly the same. It's for everyone to be able to see and acknowledge everyone's differences.
It's that, like I said, that queering, right, where you turn and you look at all sides of who someone is, as opposed to just that narrow definition.
Yeah, and we treat people equitably based on based on who they are and what they bring to the table, rather than treating folks equally.
Right. Yeah.
Equal's never really truly equal.
Right. Absolutely. All right, we have a couple more questions in here. So Jay, and I'm going to botch your last name, Usrr, USRR, asks, for the uninitiated, can you explain what the prefix cis means and its origin? I don't actually know the origin of cis. When you say you're cisgender, it means your biology matches your identity. So when I say
what?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go for it. All good.
So the way I like to explain it is that the gender that you identify with matches the gender that you were assigned at birth. At birth.
Yeah.
So we are taking biological gender out of it, because biological gender, it erases a multitude of people, including intersex people who don't fit into the neat.
I have some
gender
old
binary
habits I need to break. That's one of them. It is.
I am schooling the teacher here. I took classes with Regina.
That.
It's very satisfying. But
very satisfying. Thanks. I will have you know that my textbook that I use for women's studies still uses biological gender, even though it was published in 2018.
Yes, it is a little outdated.
Yeah.
But yes, cisgender means that you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. So I was assigned female at birth, and I still identify for the most part with that gender. The flip side of that is transgender, when you identify with a gender other than the one that you were assigned at birth.
Yes, that's the phraseology.
And this also encompasses non-binary people who do not fit into the gender binaries, or people who identify as outside the gender binary altogether as agender people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is not even all of it.
Yeah, I think that was probably like the most salient point that you made there. Like, you know, like cisgender means that you were that your identity matches what you were assigned at birth, versus trans. Like, it doesn't mean the opposite of what you were assigned at birth.
Yes.
It means not what you were assigned at birth.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And this ties into another question that Jay had. Would a man involved with a trans woman be identified universally as a straight man?
Do they believe that their partner is a woman? Because I hope so, for your partner's sake.
Yep.
So, yes.
And I think that that's also like their, yes, and their identity as well. Right. Yes. It's good questions, though. Like, there are questions that, you know, these are questions that people have and would ask. So I think
I also have to acknowledge we are all cis people trying to talk about this. So take this with a grain of salt. Someone who actually has these struggles would be able to talk better about this.
Right. We do not have a lived experience of this. So
yes, we're trying our best here.
And we're still learning, all of us.
Yeah. Always a conversation.
I love you, Regina.
I know. I love you too.
I just like to poke sometimes. It's fun.
Why do you think I have you here? You think this is an accident? All right. Okay. We still haven't done romantic versus sexual, or did we? We kind of touched on it.
Ready with my notes. Okay. So, sexual attraction. Typically, who do you want to be sexually involved with? This may be the same or different than the people who you actually want to have romantic relationships with. And not all people want both. So kind of separating them from each other acknowledges that, because I am kind of in like the gray area of both, where not all people experience these desires and relationships in the same way. So and then there are relationships, like queer platonic relationships, where people will have basically a partnership where they don't necessarily have sex with each other, but they are still romantically or not romantically involved in to, you know, have children or to live together long term. This has happened for a long time. Like, Boston marriages are were not just
Is that a
codes.
phrase for it? Boston
Yes.
marriages?
Yes.
Oh.
And let me look up to make sure that it is in fact Boston marriages.
I mean, I know about queer platonic relationships, and I know people who are in them
Yes.
who can
Okay.
present as technically as like hetero, but who are not, you know, sexually involved with each other. So
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
it's, you know, it's a thing.
So Boston marriages were where usually wealthy women in history have cohabitated together, and sometimes it was code for, you know, queer lesbian women who it was just like people not saying anything.
Right.
That was just like the code for it at the time, but also they were not necessarily involved and just cohabitated together long term because they
Right.
they maybe didn't want to get married to a man, and this was a more feasible way to live together.
Right. Yep.
I don't know. I feel like I went off the rails there.
It's all right. It's all right. We do have another question. We have a question from Mickey Weister. What is a pansexual? Jay, do you want to take that definition?
I figure one of the pansexual folks should probably answer
The way
this one.
I think of it is experiencing attraction to people regardless of gender, male, female, anything in between. You know, that you're attracted to the person. You know, gender doesn't really have a lot to do with it. But
I would, yeah.
Incorrect on that?
No, I think I totally agree. I think that's my understanding as well. And like I said, the evolution was, you know, started out, or, you know, the term bisexual, you know, has the reading of the binary between male and female, where pansexual is that kind of that all encompassing. And as we had mentioned before, isn't exclusionary of trans identities as well. So good.
Great.
I think we have covered the vast majority of the terms that I wanted to make sure we kind of talked about today. So let's launch into what I know everybody's been dying to talk about, because it's what we talk about, which are our favorite representations of queer identities that we've seen kind of in comic books, TV shows, movies, books. I think that's all of them. Yes.
Yeah.
Video games.
Media.
Yes. So the media. I'm gonna start us off because we talked yesterday about this part of the panel, and so I want to start with this one character because we all talked about this character.
I mean, y'all know who's coming.
So we're gonna talk about Willow from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, look at that! She got brought props.
Yay!
Hello.
Yes. So as one of the, I don't know, the first queer characters that I remember seeing, question mark.
Explicitly?
Explicitly,
yes.
Yes. Very openly, very clearly identified as lesbian with, you know, same-sex kiss and, you know, all of those things that happen. Yeah.
And what's interesting for me with her is to see her initially try dating a man and then date a woman, because that resonated with me personally, trying to find my way. And then, you know, everyone has their own orientation, and she determined that she was a lesbian.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. She explicitly said it in the later seasons of the show.
Yeah. What was that last part you said, Jay? You got cut off there.
I was just thinking, okay, that's not me. I'm gonna keep looking.
Right. Yes, exactly. That process. I also want to posit that Willow is demisexual.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Yeah, because she was like, I mean, she was kind of like dating at Xander in the earlier seasons, and then actually had a genuinely loving relationship with Oz that like devastated her when he up and left.
Yeah.
Which is like it's a damn shame that Seth Green left that show, because it got significantly worse after he left. But yeah, like I mean, yeah, like she is explicitly stated in later seasons that like yes, like I'm pretty gay, but
right.
But yeah, I mean, like she's absolutely, I mean, like this isn't to say that we're trying to like erase what she's self-identifying as, but just like in rewatching the show as many times as we all have, like it seems like demisexual is probably a better term for her.
Yeah, well, and she can be both those things. But I think I only had just kind of realized that she was demisexual as I was preparing for this panel and thinking about characters, because demisexuals have this, and I'm stealing this from Isabela. She said this in a panel. Demisexuals have this habit of falling in love with their friends.
Oh, if we want to talk about, it's only looking back that I realized how a little bit in love I was with a lot of my female friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've never done that.
Yeah, yeah. But I think if you look at Willow's stories and how the two primary female relationships that she had started out very much as friendships that evolved into more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's just very telling of demi experience, at least from my own. Yeah. So
sounds good to me.
Yeah. So, all right. We had another question here. Jay User. Sorry again if I botched your name. McMenomy, everybody botches my name. Based on how pansexuals have been portrayed in popular media, Deadpool, Solo, do you think the term has been compromised and should be eliminated?
I don't agree with that. I mean, I know Deadpool's overplayed, and I also have a Deadpool back there, because he's kind of the most visible comic book presentation of pansexuals. But Deadpool has other issues that kind of make him off the rails. It's kind of not the pansexuality that's problematic about Deadpool. It's kind of Deadpool himself that can be problematic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I would argue that a problematic representation doesn't erase the term. It just means it's problematic.
Yeah,
There's problematic portrayals everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and shouldn't necessarily erase the portrayal.
Yeah, I don't think
erase the term. Sorry.
I don't think that you should erase the term. Like, I think if anything, Deadpool highlights the need that there need to be more nuanced portrayals of pansexuality in media. Like, goodness, I hope.
And it's not used as a sensational thing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's not being used as a sensational thing. Yeah, I hope my girlfriend isn't watching this because she absolutely loves Deadpool. It's her favorite comic book superhero, and I'm just like, I'm just a little over Deadpool. And I just it's a once a victory that he's bringing the term pansexual to a wider audience, because Deadpool has 1 billion fans. I haven't looked at the statistics of comic books in a long time, but like, you slap Deadpool on the cover of a comic book, it's going to sell out, and in record numbers. So in that case, like, it's kind of a success, like in the same way that, like, I don't know, like Will and Grace was a success for, and Ellen DeGeneres was a success for bringing
representation.
For bringing representation to where none existed before. So now that we've got that out of the way, like, hopefully we can get something more nuanced in the conversation.
Well, and I think
not even something, like a lot of things more nuanced.
Right. That's exactly where I was going to go. Is I think that we're kind of evolving into a time where we are more comfortable taking time telling stories, and where, our media, we're consuming media in a different way. And so we have these streaming shows where all the episodes come out at once, where you can have an overarching story, as opposed to episodic TV that came out once a week, where, originally they didn't know if people were going to, watch every episode and get like the mythology episodes of X-Files, for example.
Yeah.
So, we're coming to a time where we can delve deeper in at least visual media in those stories and create more nuanced characters. And creators are more aware now than they were even 2 or 3 years ago.
And I would argue that, like, the one, like, if Deadpool is the one pansexual character that we can point to that only makes the need for more diverse representation of pansexuals in general. Yes.
Rasputin officially canonized it recently that she's pan after years.
Oh, very nice.
So just had to point that out.
Yeah, that only makes the need for more diverse representation more necessary.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
Good.
It's when you have a token character that it becomes a problem.
And that everybody keeps coming
the
back to, and then that portrayal ends up becoming the portrayal that everybody stereotypes and follows after.
It's like when Willow and Tara were the only lesbian couple on TV, and you end up murdering one of them horribly.
Yeah.
It's a little problematic.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great that you brought up the X-Men universe, because that's what North Star was back in the mid 90s, early 2000s. He was like, oh, look at that, like X-Men has a gay character now, awesome. And everyone's just like, wait, who the hell is North Star? Like,
Right.
like, well, he's our gay character.
Around the time of, when they did that big issue with his wedding to Kyle, and it was the big cover, and it really, like, it got in. So it definitely evolved, and I'm grateful for what it evolved into.
All right, what other characters do you guys want to talk about?
Oh man, I've got a list. So
I have a list too.
I mentioned that in this when we were talking earlier, but one of the reasons why I was so attracted to the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, who is not unproblematic herself, I will admit, but part of the reason I was so attracted to those books as a teen was because I was craving that queer representation from anything, even if it was, problematic.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have a drinking game for problematic.
Problematic is still representation, even if it's not.
Yeah, but when you're queer, don't really know you're a queer kid in a really small white town, that you take what you can get.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll jump in. I've got two that I wanted to really talk about. One a little bit more extensive than the other. So the first one was, and again, like, this is a problematic property just in general, but Rent the musical was one of the first musicals that I saw, like, live on stage. Like, I grew up watching, like, videotape recordings, and I went to go see it on stage, and the character Angel, who's like basically like a homeless drifter gay Latino man, was one of the ones that sticks out to me, like, mostly because it was probably the first time in my very young life that I'd seen a Latino person in any property, and they weren't like some sort of drug dealing thug, or like Bernardo from West Side Story.
Right.
Who was, like, played by a white guy with brown face in the movie with Rita Moreno, my hero.
So much trouble.
But yeah, so like I loved that in that musical he's like unapologetically gay, unapologetically just like 90s style fabulous, right? And it did a lot for me as like as remembering, like, this is one of the first gay characters in media that I really have a remembrance of, just like of seeing and consuming, like apart from like Ellen DeGeneres, who came out when I was like 11, 12 years old on the show. But then the other one that I wanted to talk about was in my favorite comic, Runaways. I brought props too. The character's name is Carolina Dean, and this is what she looks like. She's literally a rainbow, right? So she's basically just like your Abercrombie model of perfection. Like tall, like waifishly thin, long blonde hair, blue eyes, and living this secret closeted life. That she's a lesbian, and she struggles with that throughout the first 50 issues of the comics. And she has a crush on one of the teammates, doesn't know how to go ahead and tell her. She finally comes out, and it goes disastrously. Like, by the way, this is a coming of age tale, in case you couldn't tell. And I thought that the metaphor for her was just so perfect, that she wears this basically an inhibitor bracelet that looks like one of those med alert things that you wear if you have like diabetes or something like that. And when she takes it off, she turns into her true self, which is again literally a rainbow, and she's able to reach her true potential, and she's able to fly, and she feels more comfortable being this this out person, but it draws a lot of attention to herself that she may not necessarily want. And I thought it was just the entire character was a perfect metaphor. She ends up dating a shapeshifter who has no attachment to the concept of gender, but when he first meets her, he's presenting as a him, and she's just like, yeah, well, I don't really date dudes. And he was just like, oh, okay, cool, shapeshift, now I'm a female, I don't care, I'm gender nonconforming, it doesn't matter to me. And just the entire run and how Brian K. Vaughan, the original author of the series, treated her was just I felt like it was a masterclass in just in metaphors and in representation. She's hands down easily my favorite character from a comic that probably no one in chat has ever heard of, unless they know me because I just talk about it incessantly.
We recorded episodes about the first season too on Netflix. So
yeah, and she's she's great there too.
Do you guys think that young adult fiction tends to be one of the places where we see more queer representations?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is it's basically well known as a trope now that the coming out conversation as a teenager. This is I can't tell you how many times any of us have probably walked into a Barnes and Noble or RIP Borders, right?
Right.
Walked in there and just taken a look at the young adult section and just seen just a handful of books of this is how I came out. This is a coming out story. It's one of the things that, especially in modern days, I feel like a lot of folks like to go to the well for it, and it's a perfect time to go ahead and write that kind of a story for the audience that is probably going through that.
Mm-hmm. Right, because the questions of identity do tend to come up in adolescence.
Yeah, exactly.
The social structures of high school and all that stuff.
Yeah, you've probably got so many folks like Izzy and Jay who are growing up in small towns and don't know what they identify as, so they just know that something's not quite right with this whole role that I was assigned. So this is a book about someone going through a similar experience. Maybe it'll help you.
Right.
It is it's the easiest place, at least that I think, that you can go ahead and include something like that without it causing too much controversy, I suppose, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Unfortunately, perhaps in our snobbish hierarchy of important media versus less important media, I think young adult fiction and young adult media in general tends to have lower stakes to it, so you can be more experimental in it, rather than things that are aimed at adult audiences more. So I was wondering if that was part of what was kind of going on. And then that got me thinking about I'm trying to think of queer representations in Game of Thrones.
Oh gosh, what, Yara?
Not a great one, but I was gonna say Yara or Oberyn. I do love
right.
Oberyn.
Yeah.
Although to that trope that I find myself getting drawn to a lot, the quote unquote greedy bisexual. But man, I love Oberyn. He's just swag and great.
I was so sad that he was only in one season and that he died such a brutal death.
Spoilers.
I mean,
well, sorry.
Doesn't everybody die a brutal death?
What?
Doesn't everybody die a brutal death in that show?
Pretty much. There's about 5 people left. So, spoilers, I guess.
One of them's in a wheelchair after getting thrown out a window.
Yeah.
So. The violence. Yara was great though. I love, yeah, she was awesome.
But as I will say that as I get older, I tire of the coming out tale a little bit, just after having gone through it. I don't want to, especially ones that deal with the traumas of coming out, because my own coming out to my parents wasn't exactly all sunshine and rainbows. So yeah, I don't want to particularly relive that struggle. give me my happy queers who are living good lives and doing cool stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I like the new One Day at a Time series too, because it's got a combination of dealing with it as a coming out story, but it also centers it on the family and how the family responds.
Yeah, but if you want a show with some truly devastating episodes, watch One Day at a Time.
God. Man. I'm glad I watched it when I did. I don't think I could handle it right now.
Yeah, I may have cried more than I've ever cried in my life during a few of these episodes. So
it's good, and then it gets canceled. Whatever.
Yeah,
you can be mad about things. All right, Jay. I know you want to talk about video games, so let's talk about video games.
Okay. Well, as I said, when I first really discovered that bisexuality was an option was when I was playing BioWare's Dragon Age series. So in the first game, there are two, it almost seems like it was a game mechanic. There's a straight relationship with a woman, a straight relationship with a man, and then there's two characters that could either have gay or straight relationships. But the writing in that series around those characters was so good that they felt fleshed out, and just seeing characters, Zephyr and Liliana were their names, where it was situational, where they had a certain fluidity, where it really depended on who you encounter, and where you didn't have to pick a label, where there was a fluidity to the option. And I do want to give that series another shout out for taking it through subsequent games and getting more specific with it. Like you have a character in the third game who is referred to as a pansexual BDSM cow mountain, Iron.
Love that.
Theodore.
I should play these games.
There's a Dorian in the third game who is a gay male, and it's actually a big part of his backstory about how his father tried to use magic to turn him straight, and it's really traumatic, and it's very well written. And like you were saying with video games, you get to experience those roles. You get to maybe play as a straight female or a gay male or anything in between, and explore who you are through that projection, through interacting with these characters. And on the subject of video games, one did occur to me after we talked last night. I'm a big Overwatch fan, and the fact that their marquee character is a lesbian, kudos for Tracer. That is something great to see.
Word. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Blizzard needed to step up its game. In terms of representation, with the size crowd that they have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I was at BlizzCon last year. It was a mess of protests and all that.
They needed to do some work. So, but I think that's true. And I think one of the things that I love about games and about people finding identities through games is that experience of embodying the character and embodying the story in a way that maybe we don't with more passive media like books and TV, movies, where you just kind of sit back because you're like actually, and I mean, it's right. And BioWare is the one where you have like the actual options to romance characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So that's like a whole mechanic. And I think that's certainly, it always makes me kind of laugh to think, oh, romance is a mechanic. But if you think about your life,
actually playing those games, that's some of the most fulfilling moments are coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's really, it's a safe place to experiment too, and to test out, identities. All right, so I have a comment here. FYI, One Day at a Time is going to be on Pop TV, so it has not been 100% canceled. Yay, that's awesome.
I can't wait for it to emotionally devastate me some more.
I know, let's cry. And then Jay asked again, did we see the new Disney short? I have not.
I have not. I'm not sure what that.
Me either. I don't know. I don't know name, so I'm not sure. But Disney's also stepping up their representations. I've only watched Frozen 2 once. But there is some indication that, Elsa codes as gay as well. And in Frozen, the original Frozen, there was a gay family who own the spa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's very quick. It's just a flash on their family, but it's two men with their children. And it's still spectacular because for Disney, that's a big deal.
Oh, okay. I have more info about this.
Okay.
It's a Pixar short.
Okay.
Called Out, about a gay man who finds love and acceptance.
Oh.
And apparently it's very popular.
I have seen people mention
one of
it,
the few
but I haven't watched it.
representations in animated stuff. So that's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, Jay just put that out. Is about coming out. Well,
Thank you. I haven't actually seen it yet, so I'll have to see it.
We'll have to check it out.
Talk about it.
I'll have to check out.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say out.
I mean, considering it's a Pixar short, and Pixar shorts are usually emotionally devastating.
Tearjerkers.
Also,
Yes,
so.
they're
Oh God, yeah.
I've cried at everything. Well, Pixar films, like sobbed during.
I know the
Inside
Pixar
Out.
Shorts just happened to do it in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
Not hold back. It's just wipe you
I
out.
remember going to see Inside Out in the theaters, and the short before that one was Lava, with the two volcanoes falling in love. I cried the entire time. Like I was sitting there, like the movie hasn't even started
I
yet,
know.
and I'm ready.
And then that movie makes you cry too. So it's just
oh God, it's
like
terrible.
really okay. So Jay said that he cried as well watching Out. So yeah, I'm sure it is Pixar's thing, and they're very good at it and very talented, and thankful for that.
Yes, they are.
For the people who are watching live, if you have a character you want us to talk about, you're welcome to throw that into the chat as well. I will not guarantee that we have an all-encompassing knowledge of every queer character, but we do represent a lot of different fandoms here. So.
Oh, I haven't mentioned Korra from Legend of Korra.
I was just about to call on you.
Thank you for that segue. I did just get one of the comic book in mail just yesterday, so that's exciting. But Korra was one of those characters that I so for those who don't know, Legend of Korra is the sequel series to Avatar: The Last Airbender by Nickelodeon, and Korra is a waterbender who it is never explicitly said in the show, except that at she is code, like people were reading into it like all along, and I'm pretty sure the big fan push for it is what eventually convinced the writers to write it into the show. I'm pretty sure they've said so. But at the end, she and her girlfriend walk into a brilliant light and act like they're going to kiss, but it's never explicitly on screen as a kiss, except that in the comic books, right after that, it's shown that they're kissing. So it is. And immediately after that all came out, the creator said, yes, they are gay. So, or they are queer, because I'm pretty sure Korra is bisexual also.
Right.
So, yeah.
So
I adore her. I cosplay her. So
here is
clearly
Isabela cosplaying.
Oh gosh, that is so old.
It's not that old. There you go. It's not quite.
That is probably 2014, 2015.
I was going to say 5 years. 5
years is a lot if you're talking about early 20s and late 20s. Just saying.
It was 2016. My phone just told me it was 2016, so it wasn't that far.
4 years ago.
I remember it being one of the first cons that we went to together. Yeah. I think it was the first time we went to Emerald City.
Yes,
actually.
Nice. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we had a table with.
Feels like ages ago, because that was about 25 cons ago.
Oh God, yeah.
I'm not saying we have a problem with going to cons.
No, we have a problem with what you do to us at the cons, and how much lighter my wallet is at the end of.
No idea what you're talking about at all.
Oh no. No. This picture of Neil deGrasse Tyson up there, that's definitely not something that you buy.
Okay, people, I do have a habit of walking the two of them down the aisles that I know they're going to find things and they're going to buy, and encouraging them gently
Pretty
to buy
much.
them. Okay, maybe not so gently. But they do the same thing to me. I have a Star Wars a Han shot first panorama picture hanging over my TV that Isabela made sure I bought at the last Rose City Comic Con. So.
Oh. And don't you also have that that metal sculpture of I drink and I know things?
I do.
Yeah.
I do have a cutout of I drink and I know things, which I still think should have been the motto for my dissertation. All right, let's see. We have another question here. Rachel Bennett is asking, what are your thoughts on Alice from the original L Word regarding bi representation? I haven't watched the L Word.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to cut out of this one.
Oh,
I've never
Jay.
It's been a long time since I've watched the L Word. Probably, like, gosh, 10 more years. So, but I remember people were not very happy about the representation because they kind of, I think it is an example of bi erasure, if I am remembering right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Do you know, Jay?
I don't have a good memory about these things.
Did you watch the show, Jay?
I did not. No, I was just saying hi to Rachel because she's a good friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
About Rachel, I'm sorry.
I don't think any of us have enough.
Yeah, from what I remember, the L Word was pretty bi erased quite a lot. So
yeah, that. I watched like a handful of episodes, and I've read some articles. There was a lot of academic discussion about it when it came out, and I was reading more of that stuff back then. And so I've read a little bit here and there, but I don't know it enough to really comment. I have watched like I told Isabela I call the show the new Sex in the City. It's called The Bold Type.
Yeah.
They're in their early 20s, and there was one of the characters in that kind of went through the journey of recognizing that she was lesbian, and then she broke up with her girlfriend and then was sleeping with a guy, and she's just like, what's happening to me? And I'm like, you're pan or you're bisexual, like it's okay. And then finally, like, it took 3 episodes for them to kind of come to say, oh, it's okay that you're bisexual. And I was like,
and what I told you was you gotta have plot, I guess.
Yeah, you got it.
That's a simple
they
plot.
Needed a story for those 3 episodes, so it had to be this like big thing for it. And I'm like, what do you mean? What's happening? This is normal too, and fluid, and hello, and anyway. Okay, I'm stopped watching that show. And the Geek Embassy does not endorse the Bold Type. All right, we have a comment from Beth Lopez about Flick and CJ from Animal Crossing. They gush about each other's talents and say partner when talking about each other. They have to be queer. Oh, I'm fascinated. Tell me more.
I have
they are totally boyfriends. One of them, so CJ is an otter that comes to your island and you can sell fish to him. And Flick is a lizard who you can sell bugs to. So, but they talk about each other, and they basically have a business together and talk about each other as their partners and like squee about each other.
Oh.
And they are definitely married. So
that's awesome.
Those are my thoughts. I don't care, Nintendo. You can say it isn't a thing and that they're just business partners, but we all know what that means.
Right. Well, there is lots of coded language like friends and partners where,
gal pals,
where people have, over, the years had those relationships and, represented them in ways that were
Zena
safe.
and Gabrielle were just gal pals
friends.
who were just soulmates who died for each other several times and kissed on screen multiple times and ended up together at the end.
Yep.
Gal pals.
Rachel Bennett made another comment. She did a quarantine rewatch of the L Word, and it is rough. It hasn't aged well. But it was so important to her as a young queer when it first came out. And I would agree with that. I think it was, especially to have the title and have it be like center storied. I think it was, you know, important. And, you know, I have said this, and I will continue to say this. It's really, we can't really judge. We have to judge where it was at the time. So it's not going to be the kind of representation we want now, because our understanding of representation is so much deeper and more nuanced now. And we're having conversations about this, like this panel where, you know, 10 years ago, I don't think 4 people would have been comfortable sitting talking about the evolution of their sexual identity in an online format, you know, like we are here. So,
yeah, so the L Word came out in 2004. So it is definitely a product of its time, because that was still
very early, 2004.
Like 15 years ago. It was early days still for that kind of thing.
That's practically the Wild West.
Yeah. Well, I remember there's one episode of Sex and the City where Charlotte gets in with a bunch of like high-powered lesbians, and she becomes like friends with them, but she's not interested. She's not sexually attracted to them, but they all think she's like, you know, on her way to this discovery.
Yeah.
And then once she admits that she's not going to be sexual with any of them, they kick her out of the group.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. But that was
problematic, maybe.
Yes, definitely problematic.
Turns out we are not all a clique.
Right.
It's everyone.
Right, exactly. So I think Beth said, I think Flick is a chameleon. So, yeah.
Oh, that was...
Makes sense. Chameleons do eat bugs.
That's true. That's true.
All right. Loves them a lot.
I'm trying to see what we had left kind of on our notes. I do think we need to acknowledge that the Marvel Cinematic Universe needs help.
Yeah, because the only character that they have, or I suppose 2 characters that they've got, Valkyrie kind of codes as gay, and Captain Marvel, especially like in Endgame with her haircut, like super codes as gay. And even in her own movie with the close relationship that she had with Maria Rambeau, it was like,
oh, that was so gay.
Oh yeah, like, I walked out of the movie, and I texted the woman that I was dating at the time, and I was just like, pretty sure that they're gay, and she lived in a different city, and she's like, I'm pretty sure. I'm like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But so like neither of us like felt really comfortable just being like, yeah, like definitely is, but like that just bespeaks to the problem that like the best part of the best kind of representation in the cinematic universe is this kind of like nebulous coded character. And we haven't had any on-screen kisses, we haven't had any on-screen relationships, like
I have some hopes for Valkyrie, because Tessa Thompson has come out and said she's bi. I played her as bi, you know, for what that's worth. And I'm hoping that in Thor: Love and Thunder, with her maybe playing a more prominent role as the new Queen of Asgard, they will give her, you know, a relationship. And just do it. I want to see that, please.
Yeah, I'm good. I
would hope so.
Yeah.
I kind of hope the same thing for the Winter Soldier and the Falcon when that show comes out on Disney Plus, because like there was definitely a little bit of like I think unspoken tension between Cap and Winter Soldier, especially like in the Winter Soldier and in Civil War and things like that.
I've written that fiction.
I'm sorry?
I've written that fan fiction.
Oh, fantastic.
They're definitely boyfriends.
But yeah, like I feel like
so much.
But yeah, I definitely feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier can they're on the way to developing that kind of a friendship or a kinship.
Yeah. I hope so.
But
yeah,
I'm here
maybe
for
that's
it.
just me reading too into it, but I'm definitely here for it.
All right, we have another great comment from Adam. It says, for me, the first representation of a non-binary person, not just in media, but at all, was Quina from Final Fantasy. That's 9, right? I'm so bad with so many numerals. Okay.
Yes.
Quina was always referred to with the pronoun s/he. And at the time, I just thought it was a translation error, but it kept popping up. So I looked into it, and that was really my first exposure to the concept of being non-binary.
Oh, wow.
Way to go,
That's
Final
awesome.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
I am not that familiar with Final Fantasy at all because it is a huge universe.
I gave up on playing Final Fantasy because turn-based combat just bores the snot out of me, but like, good job for representation.
Well, Final Fantasy, I have found, has some very rabid fans.
You think?
The people who love Final Fantasy really love Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
But I have the same issue with the gameplay. I tried, I think, multiple Final Fantasy games, and I never got into it. But the representations and the fan fiction and the fan art and the attachment that people have to the characters in Final Fantasy is awesome. I think it's fantastic. And the stories that come out of it, I think, are really powerful. So I'm really glad, again, like I said, I think games and as a media is a really great place to have, you know, these representations, especially since you do get to kind of inhabit the characters. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap up. We were at about 2:30 now, so we've gone for about an hour and a half. I wanted to thank everyone who tuned in and listened, especially those who commented and gave questions. You made this a really fun and interactive panel, as I hoped it would be. I'm going to let each one of our panelists here give you like their send out to share where you can check out their work and their writing and catch them on their social media. And we'll start with Dante.
Oh, okay, cool. Again, I'm Dante Buccieri. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dante Informal. Disclaimer, a lot of it these days is either like Magic the Gathering or Black Lives Matter, pretty heavily on the Black Lives Matter right now. So if that's not really your thing, I'm not sure why you're tuning into this program, but also just be aware, like that's basically where my head is right now. And yeah, that's where you can find me. And we record an episode of the Geek Embassy Watches roughly like once every 4 to 6 weeks. We haven't done anything this month yet, but it's coming. So keep an eye out on thegeekembassy.com, and we'll make it happen for you. All
right, Jay.
All right. My socials are under my gender neutral nom de plume, which is JAYEMILIUS. That'll get you on Twitter. On Facebook, I'm J Milius author, and yeah, occasionally maybe I'll write something for the Geek Embassy because it's been a while and I feel like I owe you.
I'm always happy when you're writing for us, so you're always welcome. All right, Izzy.
You can find me on Twitter at Izzarizzo, IZZORIZZO, and geekembassy.com. Disclaimer, it's pretty much all Black Lives Matter right now too, so
I see it.
Don't
many of us
don't come looking if you're not interested in that. So
all right, I am Regina McMenomy, executive editor at thegeekembassy.com. My podcast is Game On Girl, which is based on my dissertation research and talks about gender and gaming and broad pop culture now as well. So check out the feed. You can find that on my Twitter, which is at DocLiz with 2 Z's. You can also find me on Instagram under that same name. We have Twitter for the Geek Embassy at the Geek Embassy, and the same for Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening, for sharing your comments and questions. Please follow up, hit us up on our social media, chat with us. We're all very open and happy to have these conversations and to continue them. So thanks for listening. And until next time, queer on. I was so proud of that one.
That's pretty good. Thank you again to AwesomeCon and Rose City Comic Con for sponsoring this talk. Thank you so much
for having us on.
Letting the four of us. Yeah.
Yes, and we're big fans. We've all been to Rose City Comic Con, so.
Yes, and thank you to our moderators.
Yes, thank you for the moderators who went through all the questions for us. We had Leslie, Lauren, and Heather helping out with the comments. So thank you. So, bye.
Appreciate it. Take it easy, folks.